Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we venture into the frozen heart of rural Pennsylvania, a place of forgotten corners, isolated small towns, and endless stretches of darkness where help does not reach. Within these remote areas, we uncover 7 disturbing true night shift horror stories, accounts so terrifying they have haunted those who lived them for years. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of rural Pennsylvania, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Mark, and this happened during my first year working as a night janitor at a hospital in rural Pennsylvania. The building was old, with peeling paint, flickering fluorescent lights, and hallways that echoed every tiny sound. On my first few nights, the emptiness was overwhelming. I would push my cart down endless corridors, mop floors in abandoned wings, and hear things that didn't make sense. Soft whispers, footsteps in rooms I had already checked. At first, I brushed it off as nerves. But one night, around 2 a.m., I walked past the intensive care wing and saw a shadow standing at the end of the hallway. It didn't move like a normal person. Its form was tall, slightly hunched, and impossibly still. I froze, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would echo down the empty corridors. I blinked and the shadow seemed to vanish, but the uneasy feeling didn't leave me. I tried to focus on my tasks, mopping and wiping surfaces, but every reflective window and shiny floor made me catch glimpses of movement in the corners of my eyes. The hospital felt alive in a way it shouldn't, like it was watching me. Then came the whispers, low and unintelligible, echoing down the hallways. I stopped, frozen, listening as they grew louder, almost beckoning me toward the surgical wing. My rational mind told me it was just the wind through old vents, or my imagination running wild. Yet, when I turned the corner, I found a surgical tray set neatly on the floor with instruments arranged as if someone had been performing surgery moments ago. I hadn't seen anyone in that wing for hours. The air was thick, metallic, and smelled of something that wasn't blood. But wrong. As I stood there, staring at the instruments, a cold draft swept through the hall, carrying with it that same whispering, now sharper and almost urgent. My skin crawled. I told myself to stay calm, that this was a job, and I needed to finish it. I grabbed my mop and tried to move toward the cleaning closet to collect more supplies, but every step echoed unnaturally loud, as if the walls themselves were listening. Then I heard it, a slow, deliberate tapping from the ceiling above, like fingers drumming on pipes. I looked up, expecting a maintenance worker, but the lights flickered violently, and the tapping stopped, replaced by a heavy, shuffling sound behind me. My heart slammed against my ribs. I wanted to run, but my legs felt frozen. The silence that followed was worse than any noise, a kind of suffocating anticipation that made my chest tighten. Finally, forcing myself to move, I rounded the corner into the administrative wing, hoping to find a colleague or at least some sign of life. The offices were empty, papers scattered on desks as though blown by a breeze that didn't exist. I paused by the receptionist desk and noticed a voicemail blinking on the machine, a message I hadn't seen before. Hesitant, I pressed play. A distorted voice whispered my name, dragging it out in a slow, guttural hiss that made my stomach turn. I dropped the phone, but the whisper didn't stop. It seemed to come from the walls, the floors, even from inside my own head. My breathing became shallow and panicked, and I realized I had no idea which way to run. Every door I tried was locked or led to another empty hallway, endless and suffocating. Something was hunting me, and I could feel it, just out of sight, circling, waiting for me to make a mistake. Desperation took over. I decided to head toward the basement, thinking maybe the security office there could offer some help. The stairwell smelled damp and rotted, and every step I took seemed to echo endlessly, bouncing off the concrete walls. As I descended, the whispers followed. Louder now, overlapping, impossible to ignore. I reached the bottom and flicked the light switch, but the bulbs barely flickered before dying completely, plunging me into near darkness. My heart raced, and I could feel my skin prickling, like something invisible was brushing past me. Then I saw it. A dark figure leaning against the wall at the far end of the basement, its face hidden in shadow. It didn't move, but I could sense its attention was on me. A low, guttural growl filled the space, vibrating through the concrete floor and up my legs. I realized this wasn't just a hallucination. This was something alive, something patient, and it had been waiting for me. Frozen in place, I tried to calm my racing mind, but the figure began moving, slowly, deliberately, its silhouette stretching and bending in unnatural ways. My instincts screamed to run, but every step toward the exit seemed miles away. Suddenly, a metallic clang echoed from behind me, and I spun to see a cart of cleaning supplies sliding toward me as if pushed by invisible hands. My fear boiled over, and I bolted toward the basement door, lungs burning, heart hammering. I could hear it following, the shuffling footsteps echoing mine, faster now, almost laughing in its rhythm. I finally reached the stairwell and scrambled up, fumbling with the switch at the top. Lights flickered on, and for a moment, the halls were empty again. But when I dared to look behind me, the shadow appeared at the far end of the corridor, closer than it had any right to be. I realized then that this night, the hospital itself had become a predator, and I was its prey. I ran down the endless corridors, my shoes slapping against the cold linoleum, echoing louder than ever. Every hallway looked the same, twisting and turning in ways that made no sense. The whispers had grown into guttural voices, muttering incomprehensible words that seemed to crawl under my skin. I turned a corner and saw the shadow again. Closer this time, its limbs contorted in ways a human body never could. The lights flickered violently, and I caught a glimpse of its face, a featureless void. Yet I felt it staring straight into me, reading every thought, every fear. I slammed a door behind me, hoping to block it, but the shuffling continued on the other side, faster now, like it could pass through walls. My mind screamed, "Where is security? Where is anyone?" But the building was silent, alive in a way that was wrong, feeding on my panic, stretching its halls to trap me further. Cornered, I ducked into a supply closet, heart hammering, sweat pouring down my face. I held my breath as the shuffling stopped outside. The darkness pressed against the door, heavy and almost tactile. I could hear breathing now, deep, slow, and impossibly close. I wanted to scream, but my voice refused to come. Then, without warning, the closet door creaked open slowly, as if pushed by a hand that wasn't there. I stumbled backward, and my eyes met the void where its face should have been. The whispers erupted into a deafening cacophony, all at once, each voice accusing, each one dragging me closer to panic. I tripped over a mop bucket and crashed to the floor, scrambling toward the door. A cold hand, or something that felt like one, touched my shoulder, and I bolted, running blindly down the hall. For the first time, I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to escape the thing that had made this hospital its hunting ground. I barreled through the hallways, my vision blurred by fear and sweat. Every turn led me deeper into parts of the hospital I didn't recognize. Hallways that twisted impossibly, doors that opened into empty rooms filled with shadows that weren't quite human. The whispers had become a roar in my head, each syllable hammering into my skull, demanding I look, demanding I obey. Then I saw it, standing at the end of a long corridor, impossibly tall, its limbs bending in grotesque angles, its featureless face now glowing faintly in the flickering light. I froze. It tilted its head slowly, as if mocking my fear, and then began gliding toward me without making a sound. I stumbled backward, tripping over discarded equipment, and hit the floor. My mind screamed, my heart threatened to burst, and I realized something horrifying. This thing wasn't confined to one area. It was in every shadow, every corner, waiting. Escape was not just difficult. Escape was impossible. I finally burst through the double doors into the lobby, expecting safety, only to find it deserted. Lights flickering, elevators dead, phones silent. I ran to the exit, and for a brief moment, I felt the cool night air brush my face. Relief surged, until I looked back. The shadow was standing just outside, impossibly still, yet impossibly close. It raised a hand, or something resembling a hand, and the whispers returned, soft and intimate now, calling my name. I didn't wait to see what it would do. I sprinted into the woods behind the hospital, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. I didn't stop until the first hints of dawn broke the horizon. I never went back to that hospital, and I quit my night shifts forever. But sometimes, late at night, when the halls are silent, I swear I hear its whispering in my apartment, waiting for me to return. My name is Daniel, and this happened during my first night shift at an abandoned factory in rural Pennsylvania. The place was massive, metal beams towering overhead, and the smell of rust and decay hung in the air. My job was simple: inspect machinery, ensure nothing was malfunctioning, and log any irregularities. But as soon as I stepped inside, I felt a cold weight pressing down on me. The floorboards creaked under my boots, echoing through the empty halls, and every shadow seemed to twitch with a life of its own. At first, I blamed my nerves on the isolation, the hours of wandering through dark corridors. But then I heard it, a faint scraping sound coming from the far end of the production floor. I paused, listening as the noise grew louder, deliberate, almost like someone dragging a heavy chain across the metal floor. I squinted into the darkness and saw a shape, tall, hunched, moving with jerky, unnatural motions that made my stomach twist. I tried to convince myself it was just an old machine settling, but the shape didn't match anything mechanical. Its movements were deliberate, calculated, like it was watching me, studying my reactions. I cautiously advanced, keeping the dim flashlight aimed at the figure, but it never came fully into view. The scraping sound stopped abruptly, replaced by a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the factory floor. I could feel it in my chest, my bones, as if the building itself was alive and resonating with something malevolent. Then came the whisper, soft at first, almost polite. "Daniel." My blood ran cold. I hadn't told anyone my name yet, and no one else was inside. The voice echoed through the cavernous halls, bouncing off metal walls in ways that felt impossible. My pulse quickened. I realized this was no ordinary intruder. Whatever it was, it knew me, and it had been waiting. I tried to move quietly, sticking close to the rusted machinery, but the factory seemed to shift around me. Shadows stretched unnaturally, and the tall, hunched figure darted between beams, always just out of reach. The scraping sound returned, slow and deliberate, coming closer with each step I took. My flashlight flickered, threatening to die, and I realized that without it, I would be swallowed entirely by the darkness. Then I heard a metallic clatter behind me, a chain dragging across the concrete floor. I spun around, but the aisle was empty. The figure wasn't supposed to be able to move like that. Yet I could feel its presence pressing closer, cold and oppressive. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. But the factory seemed endless, twisting impossibly, turning familiar corners into new hallways that hadn't been there before. I understood, with a sickening certainty, that this place wasn't abandoned. It was alive, and it hunted anyone who dared enter after dark. I pressed forward, trying to keep calm, but the whispering returned, louder now, overlapping itself in a chaotic, grating chorus. Daniel. Daniel. The sound echoed off the metal walls, bouncing in directions that didn't make sense. Every shadow along the aisles seemed to twitch with movement, and I felt eyes on the back of my neck, unseen but palpable. Then I noticed the machinery, gears and conveyor belts that should have been still, now moving slowly, grinding, almost as if the factory itself were awakening. I backed up, trying to retrace my steps, but the paths had shifted. A faint glow appeared at the far end of the floor, illuminating the figure for the first time. Its form was impossibly tall, limbs bending at unnatural angles, and its head tilted in a way that defied human anatomy. My throat went dry. I knew with certainty that whatever this was, it had been here far longer than I had imagined, feeding off the fear of anyone foolish enough to enter its domain. Panic surged through me, and I bolted toward the glowing figure, hoping desperately for an exit. The aisles twisted unnaturally, each turn revealing more shadows and dark corners I hadn't noticed before. The dragging, metallic scraping sound followed me, growing louder, echoing through the cavernous space like the factory itself was mocking my fear. My flashlight flickered violently, casting brief, distorted images of the figure in multiple places at once. It moved with impossible speed, yet never fully came into focus, its limbs bending and stretching in ways that made my stomach churn. I tripped over a pile of broken crates, the sound of splintering wood masking the soft, deliberate whispers calling my name. I scrambled to my feet, realizing that the factory had become a maze designed to trap me, each hallway feeding into another, endless, oppressive. I was completely alone, or so I thought, hunted by something that didn't belong in the natural world, something patient, calculating, and utterly relentless. I backed into a corner, trying to catch my breath, but the whispers had grown into a deafening chorus, vibrating in my skull. The figure's glowing head appeared above a stack of machinery, its limbs stretching impossibly, moving like liquid metal. The floor beneath me seemed to pulse, echoing the dragging sound with every heartbeat. I tried to call out for help, but my voice came out as a strangled gasp. Then, with a sudden, unnatural movement, the figure lunged, disappearing into the shadows around me, leaving only the faint outline of its limbs etched against the walls. I realized it wasn't just following me. It was shaping the factory itself, bending the environment to keep me trapped, to feed off my terror. My mind screamed to escape, but every route I took seemed to lead me deeper inside. The factory had become alive, a predator, and I was nothing more than prey caught in its endless, twisted labyrinth. I ran blindly through the aisles, my flashlight barely cutting through the thick darkness. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist, turning the factory into an impossible maze. The dragging sound was everywhere, circling me, echoing off metal beams and walls, and the whispers were louder than ever, calling my name in mocking, inhuman tones. I stumbled over a conveyor belt and fell hard, my hands scraping against sharp edges. I scrambled to my feet, terrified to look back. But when I did, I saw the figure gliding toward me, limbs bending impossibly, its glowing head tilting in ways no human should. My mind raced for an escape, any exit. But the building had transformed around me. Corridors that led to the exit minutes ago were now dead ends, walls closing in, shadows pooling thicker and darker. It wasn't just hunting me. It was playing with me, testing my fear, bending reality around its will, and I realized with horror that I might never leave this place alive. Desperation overtook me. I scrambled up a stack of crates, my hands raw and bleeding, hoping to gain higher ground and see the layout of the factory from above. From this vantage point, I realized with growing dread that the building was no longer normal. It had shifted, folding on itself, aisles stretching impossibly long, stacks of crates appearing where there had been none. The figure moved below, silently, smoothly, its glowing head scanning every shadow. The dragging sound circled, like it was stalking my very heartbeat. I spotted a narrow service door at the far end, a faint light shining through. My hope surged, and I leapt down, sprinting toward it. But as I ran, the shadows on the walls seemed to stretch, reaching for me like fingers, trying to pull me back into the darkness. Whatever this thing was, it controlled the factory. And I realized with terror that leaving wouldn't be as simple as running. It had to let me go. I sprinted toward the service door, adrenaline pumping, my lungs burning with each step. The dragging sound was deafening now, circling me like a predator toying with its prey. Shadows stretched along the walls, moving independently, crawling toward me. I reached the door and yanked it open, expecting safety. But the hallway beyond was just as dark and twisted as the factory behind me. The figure emerged from the shadows, impossibly tall, its limbs bending in grotesque ways, glowing head fixed on me. The whispers became a deafening chorus, filling my mind with every fear I had ever known. I stumbled backward, desperately searching for another exit. But the corridors had shifted again, walls closing in. My heart sank as I realized the truth. It didn't just haunt the factory, it owned it. There was no escape unless it allowed me. I braced myself, praying I could survive long enough to find a weakness, but the thing advanced, patient and inevitable. With a surge of desperation, I leapt through a narrow maintenance hatch I hadn't noticed before, landing in a crawl space thick with dust and cobwebs. The dragging sound echoed above me, impossibly loud, yet the figure didn't follow. I crawled as fast as I could, hearing whispers fading into silence, until I finally emerged outside the factory. The night air never felt so sweet. I ran to my car, glancing back at the building one last time. In the faint glow of the factory lights, I swore I saw shadows writhing in ways no human could create, as if the building itself was alive and watching me leave. I quit that job the next day and never returned. But months later, I still hear faint scraping sounds at night, soft whispers echoing my name, reminding me that whatever haunted the Midnight Factory isn't confined by walls. It follows the fear, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to enter. My name is Sarah, and this happened during my first month working the graveyard shift at the Hollow Creek Diner in rural Pennsylvania. The diner sat alone on a winding road, surrounded by dense woods, its neon sign flickering like a dying heartbeat. Most nights were quiet, the occasional trucker stopping for coffee the only interruption to the hum of the fluorescent lights. But one night, around 2 a.m., I noticed something strange. The booths were empty, yet I could feel eyes on me. Every shadow in the diner seemed to twitch unnaturally. I brushed it off, thinking it was my nerves, until I saw movement from the corner of my eye, a figure standing just outside the fogged-up windows. I froze. Whoever it was didn't move like a person. It glided smooth and silent, stopping every few feet as if studying me. I realized then that I was completely alone with something that shouldn't exist in the quiet hollow surrounding the diner. I tried to shake off the fear and continue my work, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. Every clink of silverware, every hum of the old refrigerator sounded amplified, almost sinister. Then came the whisper, soft at first, from somewhere inside the diner. "Sarah." My heart froze. I hadn't told anyone my name, and the diner was empty except for me. The lights flickered violently, casting elongated shadows that seemed to reach for me. I stepped toward the kitchen, hoping the back door might lead to safety. But every corner I turned seemed to shift, aisles of tables stretching impossibly long. The figure outside moved closer, its face, or the lack of one, still hidden in darkness. My stomach churned as I realized it wasn't outside at all anymore. It had somehow entered the diner without me noticing. My instincts screamed at me to run, but the building felt alive, and I was trapped in its oppressive, eerie grip. I backed away slowly, trying to convince myself that it was a trick of the shadows or my own imagination. But the air had grown thick, heavy, almost sticky, and every step I took echoed unnaturally in the empty diner. The whispering had returned, louder now, overlapping itself in a chaotic, grating chorus. "Sarah. Sarah." I glanced toward the entrance, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw the front door move, as if breathing. The figure was closer now, standing near the counter, limbs unnaturally long, posture impossible. I wanted to run, but the diner seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of me. The booths and tables warping into strange angles, creating a maze that led nowhere. The fluorescent lights flickered violently, casting brief, distorted reflections of the figure in multiple corners at once. I realized with horror that I was trapped. And this thing wasn't just stalking me. It was playing with me, enjoying the fear it had created. I desperately searched for the kitchen door, thinking it might lead to the back exit. But the aisles had shifted. The diner was no longer familiar. The smell of old coffee and fried grease mixed with something metallic and foul, making my stomach turn. The figure moved closer, gliding smoothly, limbs bending in ways no human should, face still hidden in darkness. My pulse raced, my hands shaking, and I realized that the diner itself seemed to respond to the figure's presence. Shadows crept along the walls, crawling toward me like living things, and the hum of the old refrigerator began to resonate in a low, sinister tone. The whispers grew more insistent, almost screaming in my head. "You can't leave. You can't leave." I backed into a corner near the counter, my heart pounding so hard I feared it would explode. I had no weapon, no escape, and the thing that had entered this diner wasn't planning to let me go without a fight. Fear overtook me, and I scrambled over the booth seats, trying to gain higher ground and a better view of the diner. But the building had changed. The aisles stretched impossibly long, tables shifted positions, and shadows pooled thicker than the darkness outside. The figure moved below, gliding effortlessly, limbs twisting in ways that defied human anatomy. The whispering returned, now a deafening chorus echoing in my skull. "Sarah, Sarah." I tried to focus on the exit door at the far end, but it seemed farther away with every step. as if the diner itself were alive and intentionally keeping me inside. My chest burned as I realized I wasn't just being hunted. I was trapped in a place that could manipulate its own structure to feed on my fear. Every instinct screamed at me to escape, yet the faceless figure was patient, waiting, observing my every movement, testing my terror like a predator toying with prey before striking. I jumped down from the booths and ran toward the far corner, desperate for any way out. The figure mirrored me effortlessly, moving silently, yet keeping a perfect distance, always in control. The air grew colder with every step, thickening, making it hard to breathe. And I could feel the whispers crawling along my skin, inside my head, like icy fingers brushing my mind. The diner's lights flickered violently, casting distorted reflections of the figure across every surface. I tripped over a spilled coffee pot, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the cavernous room. The shadows responded instantly, stretching and curling toward me, twisting into forms that almost resembled hands. I realized with horror that the diner wasn't just haunted, it was alive, bending reality to keep me inside. And the figure wasn't chasing me. It was guiding me toward something far worse. My stomach sank as I understood that leaving this diner alive might not be possible. I spotted the back door, a faint glow of moonlight spilling through the cracks, and ran toward it with every ounce of strength I had left. The figure moved silently behind me, gliding without effort, its limbs bending unnaturally, as if the laws of human anatomy didn't apply. The diners seemed to twist and stretch, aisles lengthening and folding over themselves, turning the escape route into a torturous maze. The whispering grew louder, faster, almost deafening, repeating my name over and over, rattling my mind. I felt the shadows on the walls reaching toward me, clawing, trying to hold me back, and a cold, invisible pressure pressed against my chest, making it difficult to breathe. My mind screamed for me to run faster, but the building itself seemed to resist, as if it wanted me trapped forever. I realized that the thing hunting me didn't just occupy the diner. It controlled it, feeding on every heartbeat, every panicked thought, every drop of fear I could produce. I slammed through the back door into the alley, gasping for air, thinking I had escaped. But the moment I turned, I froze. The figure was there, just outside the moonlight, standing impossibly tall, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Shadows pooled around it like a living cloak, and the whispers reverberated inside my skull. "You can't leave. You can't leave." I stumbled backward, tripping over debris, my heart hammering. The diner's neon sign flickered, casting distorted reflections that made the shadows dance in terrifying, unnatural ways. I realized the building itself was alive, that it had been testing me, shaping itself to maximize my fear. Every instinct told me to run, but no matter where I turned, the shadows seemed to anticipate my movements. The figure didn't rush me. It waited, patient, calculating. And I knew then that whatever haunted Hollow Creek Diner wasn't just a ghost. It was something older, something that thrived on fear, and it wasn't finished with me yet. I bolted down the alley, heart hammering, hoping to put as much distance as possible between me and the diner. But the shadows followed, stretching unnaturally across the ground, curling toward me like living tendrils. The whispers grew louder, overlapping in a cacophony that made my ears ring. I glanced back and saw the figure standing at the diner's edge, impossibly tall, limbs bending in grotesque ways, glowing faintly in the moonlight. My chest tightened as I realized something horrifying. The diner itself was alive, feeding energy into this creature, controlling it, and it had no intention of letting me go. my legs moved almost on their own, racing across the gravel lot, and every instinct screamed that running wasn't enough. The creature was patient, unyielding, and I knew I would have to outsmart it, not outrun it, if I hoped to survive the night. Desperation forced me to duck into a nearby wooded area, hoping the trees and darkness would hide me. My lungs burned, and my hands shook as I pressed against the rough bark, listening. The dragging sound had vanished, replaced by silence. For a moment, I dared to hope I had escaped. Then, from the edge of the woods, I caught a glimpse of the figure's glowing head peering through the fog, motionless, watching, waiting. I realized with terror that Hollow Creek Diner didn't just haunt its building. It followed its victims, bending the environment to its will. I ran until my legs could no longer carry me, collapsing at the side of the empty road. Even now, weeks later, I still hear whispers in the wind and shadows that move just out of the corner of my eye. The Hollow Creek Diner is never empty, and its creature never stops hunting. My name is Marcus, and this happened during my first week working as a night security guard at the Ravenwood Apartments in rural Pennsylvania. The complex was mostly empty at night, the distant hum of traffic the only sound beyond the occasional creak of old stairwells. My job was simple: patrol the hallways, monitor the security cameras, and ensure no trespassers disturbed the residents. But from my first shift, something felt off. The cameras occasionally flickered, showing shadows where no one should have been. At first, I thought it was faulty equipment, until I heard soft footsteps echoing behind me in a hallway I had already checked. I spun around. Nothing. Just the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Something was moving silently through the apartments, watching, waiting, just beyond my vision. I continued my patrol, trying to focus on routine, but the sense of being watched never left. Then, on the security monitors, I saw movement, a dark shape darting across one of the empty corridors. I froze, squinting at the screen. The shape was humanoid, impossibly thin, limbs bending at unnatural angles, moving silently through the apartments. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously approached the hallway, every nerve on edge. The air was cold, unnaturally so, making my breath visible as I moved. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" No reply, only silence. And then the whispers started, soft, unintelligible at first, echoing from the vents above, swirling around me. My pulse quickened. The building that had seemed normal only moments ago was now alive with something sinister. Whatever it wasn't a resident, and it didn't belong in any world I knew. I moved slowly down the hallway, flashlight sweeping the walls, every shadow twisting unnaturally as if alive. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the vents, overlapping in chaotic, unintelligible tones that made my head spin. My flashlight flickered, briefly plunging the corridor into total darkness, and I froze. In that moment, I saw it, or rather, glimpsed its outline. A tall, unnaturally thin figure emerging from the shadows. Its limbs bent at impossible angles, and its face, if it could even be called a face, was a smooth void, reflecting nothing. My stomach twisted, and a cold sweat ran down my back. Every instinct screamed at me to retreat, but the hallway seemed longer now, stretching beyond reason, and the exit at the end felt impossibly far away. The building wasn't just haunted, it was alive, feeding on my fear, reshaping itself to trap me. And the thing stalking me moved with deliberate patience, like a predator savoring the terror of its prey. I kept moving, trying to stay calm, but every step echoed too loudly, reverberating off the walls in ways that seemed unnatural. The whispers were all around me now, circling in my ears, calling my name in soft, grating tones. Marcus. Marcus. I turned a corner and saw the figure again. Closer this time, its movements smooth and fluid, gliding over the floor without a sound. The hallway seemed to bend, walls stretching and narrowing, making escape impossible. I stumbled backward, my flashlight catching glimpses of its impossible limbs, each one bending in ways that made my skin crawl. The vents rattled above me, and the cold air from them felt like icy fingers brushing against my neck. My mind raced. Every door seemed locked, every corridor a trap, and the building itself was alive, reshaping around the creature. I realized then that it wasn't just hunting me. It controlled the entire apartment complex, and leaving alive might be impossible. I ran down the hallway, heart hammering, trying to put as much distance as possible between myself and the figure. The corridor twisted strangely, as if the building itself were bending to trap me, stretching and folding in ways that made no sense. The whispers surrounded me now, overlapping and growing louder, echoing through the vents and walls. I glanced at the security cameras from a nearby corner. The monitors showed multiple images of the figure in places I hadn't passed, as though it could be everywhere at once. My hands shook, my flashlight flickering as I raised it toward the dark end of the hall. The figure appeared again, sliding silently across the floor, limbs contorting unnaturally, head tilting at impossible angles. The building seemed to pulse with its presence, alive and malevolent. I realized with growing terror that running wasn't enough. The apartments themselves were part of the hunt, and the creature didn't need to chase me. It simply controlled the space around me, bending reality to ensure I could never escape. Desperate, I ducked into a stairwell, thinking vertical space might give me an advantage. The air was cold and thick, echoing every footstep I took. The whispers were almost deafening now, coming from all directions, blending with the metallic groans of the old building. I glanced upward and saw the figure's glowing head peering down from the upper floor, its limbs bent in ways that made my stomach churn. I sprinted down the stairs, slipping on the worn steps, feeling as if invisible hands were trying to hold me back. Every door I tried was locked, every hallway a dead end. The building wasn't just alive. It was conscious, shaping itself to maximize my terror. I realized with horror that escaping required more than speed. I had to outsmart the thing, predict its movements, and hope it would allow me a sliver of mercy. My pulse raced, my mind spinning, knowing that one mistake could trap me forever in Ravenwood Apartments, with the thing hunting me. I reached the top floor, heart pounding, desperate for an exit or even a hiding place. The hallway stretched farther than it should have, warped and bending unnaturally, the fluorescent lights flickering violently. Shadows writhed along the walls, stretching toward me like living fingers. The figure moved silently behind me, gliding effortlessly, its faceless head tilting to observe, limbs bending in impossible ways. The whispering was deafening now, echoing inside my skull. Marcus. Marcus. I tried to steady my breathing, to think of a plan. But the building itself seemed to pulse, as if aware of my thoughts. Every door I tried either led to a dead end or opened into more twisted hallways. I realized with chilling clarity that this creature didn't just inhabit the building, it controlled it, reshaping the environment to trap me. My instincts screamed that there was only one way to survive: confront it, or risk being consumed by the apartment's living darkness forever. I spotted a maintenance door at the far end, a faint glimmer of light shining through its edges. With a surge of hope, I sprinted toward it, adrenaline fueling my movements. The figure mirrored me effortlessly, gliding silently across the warped floor, limbs bending at grotesque angles. The shadows on the walls seemed to reach out, pulling at my clothes, my skin, my very essence, as if the building itself were alive and trying to consume me. I threw open the door, hoping it led to safety. But the corridor beyond was darker, longer, more twisted than anything I had seen before. The whispers intensified, overlapping into a maddening chorus. I stumbled forward, my mind racing, realizing the terrifying truth. Escaping wasn't about running. It was about surviving the apartment's manipulation, surviving the creature's patience, and somehow finding a weakness in a building that didn't want me to leave alive. Every step felt heavier, the walls alive, watching, anticipating my next move. I ran as fast as I could, heart hammering, through the twisted corridor, every step echoing unnaturally. The shadows seemed to stretch toward me, curling like claws around my ankles. The figure glided silently behind, limbs bending in impossible ways, head tilting unnaturally to watch my every move. The whispers had become a deafening chorus in my mind. "You can't leave. You can't leave." I stumbled into an elevator at the end of the hall, slamming the button for the ground floor. The doors creaked shut slowly, but the figure didn't stop. It pressed closer, its silhouette looming against the closing elevator doors. The building itself seemed to breathe with malevolent intent, warping reality, twisting floors, extending hallways, making escape nearly impossible. I pressed my back to the wall, praying the doors would close, my mind screaming that the creature didn't need to chase me. It simply controlled the environment. And if I made a single misstep, I would be trapped forever in Ravenwood Apartments' living nightmare. The elevator doors finally closed, and I leaned against the wall, gasping for air, hoping I had finally escaped. But as the car descended, I realized the building wasn't done with me. Shadows pooled at the corners of the elevator, moving unnaturally, and the whispers echoed through the metal walls. When the doors opened, I found myself back in the same twisted hallway I had started in. The figure waiting, faceless head tilted, limbs bending impossibly. I ran blindly, turning corners, stumbling over warped floors, the whispers taunting me. "You can't leave." Exhausted and terrified, I found the main exit finally open. I bolted into the night, the cold air hitting my face like a shock. Behind me, the building stood silent, as if nothing had happened. But I knew the truth. Ravenwood Apartments was alive, and its creature was patient. It would wait, always, for the next night security guard foolish enough to work the graveyard shift. I never went back. My name is Lisa, and this happened during my first week as the overnight janitor at Black Hollow School in rural Pennsylvania. The building was old, its brick walls cracked and worn, and at night it felt completely abandoned, yet strangely alive. My job was simple: clean classrooms, empty trash, and make sure the building was ready for the morning staff. But from the first night, I noticed things that didn't make sense. Doors I had locked earlier would be slightly ajar, and the echo of my own footsteps seemed delayed, almost mocking me. Around 2 a.m., as I was mopping the main hallway, I felt a cold draft and heard the faint sound of a child laughing. I froze. The school had been closed for years, and no children should be here. I looked down the hall, shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls, twisting as if alive. Something was moving just beyond my vision, watching, waiting for me to notice. I forced myself to continue my work, telling myself it was just my imagination. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger with each step. The lockers rattled in the distance, although no wind blew, and the sound of whispering followed me down the long corridors. I rounded a corner and saw a small figure standing at the end of the hallway, completely still, staring at me. I squinted, trying to make out details, but the figure's face was obscured, almost like it was hiding in shadow. When I stepped closer, it vanished, just gone, as if it had never existed. My pulse quickened. Every instinct told me to leave, but the building seemed to stretch and shift. Hallways longer than I remembered, doors opening into unfamiliar rooms. I realized that Black Hollow School wasn't just abandoned, it was alive, feeding on the fear of anyone who dared to work its night shift. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, that the shadows, whispers, and flickering lights were just tricks of an old building. But then I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, echoing in perfect sync with my heartbeat. I spun around, mop raised like a weapon, but no one was there. The lockers along the hall rattled again, this time violently, as if someone or something was inside them. My flashlight flickered, casting long, distorted shadows across the peeling walls. The figure reappeared at the end of the hallway, slightly taller now, limbs bending at unnatural angles, face obscured in darkness. My stomach churned as the cold air thickened, pressing down on me. And I realized with horror that this presence wasn't just playing games. It was feeding on my fear, testing me and learning my every move. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But the hallways seemed endless, shifting, changing, as if the building itself were alive, and there was no clear way out. I cautiously moved down the hall, keeping my flashlight low, trying to avoid the figure's gaze, though I could feel its presence watching, calculating, anticipating. The whispers became clearer, unintelligible but insistent, echoing from the vents and the ceilings. My footsteps felt loud, unnatural, and the building seemed to pulse with a life of its own, stretching corridors and warping rooms in ways that made no sense. I glanced into the gym, and my breath caught in my throat. A group of shadowy, childlike figures stood in a circle, moving in slow, jerky motions, their faces blurred and featureless. They turned toward me in perfect unison, and the whispers coalesced into a single chilling phrase. "You shouldn't be here." I stumbled backward, tripping over a loose tile, and realized the school wasn't just haunted, it was predatory. Every room, every shadow, every creaking floorboard was alive, and the thing stalking me wasn't going to let me leave without a fight. I scrambled away from the gym, heart pounding, trying to find a familiar hallway. But everything looked different. The school had transformed into a labyrinth, walls stretching impossibly, doors appearing where none should exist. The whispers followed me, echoing from every corner, overlapping with the creaks of the old building, forming a chorus of taunting voices. I caught sight of the faceless figure again, gliding silently along the ceiling, limbs bending in impossible directions as it observed my panic. My flashlight flickered violently, plunging me into darkness for a brief, terrifying moment. And when it returned, the figure was closer. Cold air rushed past me, icy and sharp, and I could feel the building itself pressing in, closing in around me. I realized the school wasn't just haunted. It was alive, intelligent, and it was feeding on my fear, learning how I moved, predicting my every attempt at escape. I had to stay calm, but every step I took made me feel smaller, trapped, and utterly vulnerable. Desperate, I tried a side stairwell, hoping vertical space might give me an advantage. The air was cold, thick, and every step I took echoed unnaturally, like it was amplified by the building itself. I glanced upward, and the faceless figure loomed at the top, impossibly tall, watching me with patient menace. My flashlight beam shook as I ran down, slipping on the worn steps, my pulse racing. The whispers now blended with the metallic groans of the building, as if the school itself were mocking me. I reached the bottom, thinking I had a chance to escape through a nearby exit, only to find it led into another hallway that twisted and extended far beyond reason. The walls pulsed faintly, shadows reaching out to grab me, and I realized the terrifying truth. Escaping Black Hollow School wasn't about speed. It was about outsmarting something that could bend reality to its will. Every instinct screamed that I was dangerously close to being trapped forever. I found myself back in the main hallway, though it no longer looked familiar. The walls twisted and stretched, the lights flickering violently, casting elongated shadows that seemed to slither across the floor. The faceless figure appeared at the far end, gliding effortlessly toward me, limbs bending in impossible angles, head tilted unnaturally. The whispers had become deafening, echoing through the vents, the floors, even inside my skull. "You can't leave. You can't leave." My legs moved on autopilot, carrying me toward the janitor's closet, my only hope of hiding. The door slammed shut behind me, but the darkness inside was thick, almost alive, pressing against me. I heard the floorboards creak outside as the figure approached, slow and deliberate. Every instinct screamed that hiding might not be enough, that this presence didn't just want to scare me, it wanted me to succumb to the building itself, to become part of its nightmarish, living architecture. I clutched the mop like a lifeline, praying it would be enough. The creaking grew louder as the figure prowled outside the closet, every step deliberate, echoing like a drumbeat of dread. The whispers swirled, unintelligible but insistent, vibrating through the walls, the ceiling, the floor beneath me. I held my breath, listening, feeling the cold air seeping under the door, as if the darkness itself were pushing inside. Then, a small, almost childlike giggle cut through the whispers, a sound so eerie it froze my blood. The closet walls seemed to pulse, shadows reaching out to touch me, testing my resolve. My flashlight lay abandoned on the floor, useless in the suffocating darkness. I realized with terror that the school wasn't just haunted or alive, it was a predator, and I was its prey. The faceless figure didn't need to enter the closet. It controlled the fear, shaping reality, making the walls stretch, the shadows crawl, the darkness itself a weapon. I understood that to survive, I had to outthink this nightmare. But every second I stayed, the building's hunger grew stronger. I forced myself to leave the closet, moving silently, hugging the walls, every step measured. The school seemed to shift around me, hallways stretching and folding in impossible ways, shadows slithering like snakes across the floor. The faceless figure appeared again, gliding effortlessly, limbs bent at grotesque angles, its presence pressing into my mind with an unbearable weight. The whispers became intelligible, almost human. "You cannot leave. You belong here." Panic surged, but I pushed forward, desperate for an exit, until I found the main doors slightly ajar, faint light spilling into the night. My relief was short-lived. The hallway behind me stretched endlessly, the figure moving silently in pursuit, undeterred by doors or distance. I ran with every ounce of strength left in me, knowing the building would fight to reclaim me if I slowed even for a second. Black Hollow School wasn't just haunted. It was alive, patient, and hungry for anyone who dared work its night shift. I burst through the doors into the cold night air, lungs burning, chest heaving. The building loomed behind me, silent and still. But I could feel its presence pressing against me, lingering in the shadows. The whispers faded, replaced by an oppressive quiet. Yet I knew it was only a pause, a momentary reprieve. I didn't look back as I ran to my car, the streetlights casting feeble illumination over the empty lot. Even as I drove away, I could feel it watching, the weight of the building and its faceless occupant pressing into my mind. Weeks later, I still wake in the middle of the night, heart racing, hearing whispers echoing through the walls of my apartment, shadows stretching just out of the corner of my eye. Black Hollow School waits, patient and eternal, ready for the next janitor foolish enough to enter its night shift nightmare. I will never return. My name is Daniel Carter, and this happened when I was working the overnight shift at a gas station just outside a small town in rural Pennsylvania. The place sat alone along a long, empty highway, surrounded by thick woods that stretched for miles in every direction. During the day, truckers and travelers stopped in constantly. But once midnight passed, the road became eerily quiet. Most nights, my job was simple: restock shelves, run the register, and watch the security cameras. But something about that particular night felt different from the start. Around 1:40 a.m., the automatic doors opened, even though no car had pulled into the lot. I looked up from the counter expecting to see someone walk in, but the entrance was empty. The wind outside was still, the road silent. I checked the cameras, thinking maybe someone had slipped in from the side. That's when I noticed something strange. One of the cameras pointed toward the fuel pumps showed a tall, unmoving figure standing under the dim station lights, even though no one had walked across the parking lot. At first, I assumed it was a trucker who had parked somewhere off camera. But the longer I stared at the monitor, the more unsettling it became. The figure wasn't moving, not even slightly. It stood beneath the overhead light at pump number 3, tall and unnaturally thin, its arms hanging too low at its sides. I stepped out from behind the counter and looked through the glass windows toward the pumps. The lot was empty. Completely empty. No person, no car, nothing. A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I slowly turned back to the camera screen. The figure was still there, standing exactly where it had been before. My mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe a camera glitch, maybe a reflection. But as I leaned closer to the monitor, the figure slowly tilted its head upward. And I swear, it was looking directly into the camera. For several seconds, I just stared at the screen, frozen in place. My brain kept trying to convince me that it had to be a camera glitch, maybe some weird shadow or reflection. But the longer I looked, the worse the feeling in my chest became. The figure didn't move its body, only its head, slowly, unnaturally. It tilted upward toward the camera. The overhead light above pump number 3 flickered once, briefly dimming the entire parking lot. When the light stabilized again, the figure's posture had changed. Its arms were slightly raised now, long and thin, hanging like crooked branches. I forced myself to look out the window again. Still nothing. The lot was empty. No person standing there. No car. Just silent pumps and the empty highway stretching into the darkness. When I turned back to the security monitor, the figure had moved closer to the building. Standing just outside the glass doors, my heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Slowly, I looked up from the monitor toward the front doors of the station. The glass entrance was only 20 feet away from the counter. And now, someone was standing outside. A tall silhouette stood directly in front of the doors, its body barely illuminated by the dim lights of the parking lot. I hadn't heard footsteps. I hadn't heard gravel crunching. It had simply appeared. The automatic doors didn't open. They just remained shut as the figure stood there, motionless. From where I stood, I couldn't see its face clearly, only the outline of something impossibly thin. Its arms hung too long, almost reaching its knees. Then the figure slowly leaned forward, not toward the door, but toward the glass, as if it was trying to look directly at me inside. For a moment, neither of us moved. I stood frozen behind the counter while the tall figure remained pressed close to the glass doors. The bright lights inside the store reflected off the window, making it difficult to see its face clearly. But something about its shape felt wrong. Its shoulders were too narrow, its limbs far too long, almost spider-like. Then the automatic doors suddenly slid open. I hadn't touched the button. No vehicle had pulled in. Yet the doors parted slowly, with a mechanical hiss. Cold night air rushed inside the store, carrying with it the smell of damp soil and pine from the surrounding woods. The figure didn't immediately step in. It simply stood there in the doorway, its silhouette stretching across the floor tiles beneath the fluorescent lights. My throat went dry as I realized something horrifying. On the security camera screen behind me, the figure was still standing at pump number 3. But another one was now standing in the doorway. My mind struggled to process what I was seeing. I slowly turned to the camera monitors again, hoping I had misunderstood. But the screen clearly showed the same tall figure still standing under the light at pump number 3, unmoving and silent. Yet another identical silhouette now stood only a few feet inside the store. The thing stepped forward. Its movements were slow but disturbingly smooth, like its joints didn't move the way a normal person should. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, I could see more details now. Its arms hung almost to its knees, and its fingers were long and crooked like black twigs. But its face, there was no face. Just a smooth shadow where its features should have been. The creature tilted its head slightly, almost curious, as if studying me. Then behind it, the automatic doors slid open again, and another tall silhouette appeared outside in the darkness. I slowly backed away from the counter, my hands trembling so badly I could barely keep them steady. The creature inside the store didn't rush me. Instead, it moved with a slow, deliberate calm that somehow felt far more terrifying. Behind it, the automatic doors opened and closed repeatedly. Each time they opened, another tall silhouette appeared outside under the dim parking lot lights. They didn't move toward the building. They just stood there in silence, facing the store like a gathering crowd. The one inside tilted its head again, studying me. Then it took another step forward. Its long fingers brushed lightly against a display rack, and the metal shelves rattled violently as if something far heavier had touched them. My chest tightened as I realized something even worse. The security cameras were still running, and on every single monitor, the parking lot was now filled with dozens of those same figures standing beneath the gas station lights. Panic surged through me. I turned and ran toward the back hallway that led to the storage room and employee exit. My shoes slipped slightly on the tile as I sprinted past shelves and refrigerators, humming in the silence. Behind me, I heard something moving. Not footsteps, something sliding, gliding across the floor. I didn't dare turn around. The hallway lights flickered violently as I reached the back door and shoved it open. Cold night air hit my face as I stumbled outside into the gravel lot behind the building. For a moment, I thought I had escaped. But then I looked toward the highway. Under the distant streetlights, dozens of those same tall figures stood scattered along the road and tree line. They weren't approaching. They were just standing there, watching, waiting. And when I turned back toward the gas station, The creature from inside was now standing silently in the back doorway. My legs felt like they might collapse beneath me. The creature stood in the back doorway of the gas station, perfectly still, its tall shadow stretching across the gravel toward my feet. Behind me, the empty highway looked darker than it should have, lined with dozens of those same unmoving silhouettes beneath the weak glow of distant streetlights. None of them stepped closer. They simply watched. A strange, suffocating silence filled the air, broken only by the faint hum of the gas station generators. I realized something terrifying then. These things weren't hunting me like animals. They were waiting, studying. The one in the doorway slowly raised one of its long arms, its crooked fingers bending in unnatural directions as it pointed toward the highway. At first, I didn't understand. But then I saw headlights approaching in the distance. A semi-truck was coming down the road, and every single shadow figure slowly turned toward it. The truck driver probably never even noticed them. From the road, the gas station must have looked normal. Bright lights, quiet pumps, nothing unusual. But as the truck rolled closer, the tall silhouettes began moving for the first time. Not quickly, just slowly stepping toward the road. Their movements were smooth and unnatural, like shadows peeling away from the darkness itself. I didn't stay to watch what happened next. The moment the truck slowed to pull into the station, I ran across the gravel lot and into the trees behind the building. Branches scraped against my arms as I pushed deeper into the woods, refusing to look back. By morning, police found the gas station empty. The truck was still parked at pump number 3. Its engine was running. The driver was gone. And according to the security cameras, I had left the building alone. No other figures ever appeared on the footage. My name is Lisa, and this happened during my first month working the night shift at a sprawling warehouse in rural Pennsylvania. The building was massive, rows of shelves stretching so high I couldn't see the ceiling, and dim emergency lights flickering along cracked concrete floors. At night, the place felt like a labyrinth, a concrete jungle full of shadows that shifted with every movement. I was alone most nights, tasked with inventory and making sure the security cameras were functioning. And at first, I thought the silence would be comforting. But it wasn't. The silence had a weight, pressing down on me, making every creak, every distant clang echo like a scream. One night, as I checked a far aisle, I saw movement in the corner of my eye. A figure, tall and thin, slipped between the shelves, just barely visible. I froze, telling myself it was a fellow worker or security guard. But the warehouse was empty. I was completely alone. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, that the long hours and fluorescent lights were playing tricks on me. But as I continued down the aisle, I felt it. Eyes watching me from the darkness, unblinking, following my every move. The echo of my footsteps sounded wrong, uneven, like something or someone was matching them. I reached the end of the row and saw an empty pallet stacked with boxes. Yet one of the boxes was slightly ajar, as if someone had been rifling through it. I stepped closer and heard a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. "Why are you here?" My heart slammed into my chest. The voice wasn't over a speaker or coming from the radio. It was inside the warehouse, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. I spun around, but the aisles were empty. Every light flickered violently, and a cold breeze swept down the aisle, even though the doors were sealed tight. Whatever was here, it wasn't human. I forced myself to keep moving, telling myself that if I stayed calm, I could finish my shift without incident. But the deeper I went into the warehouse, the heavier the silence became. Every shelf seemed to bend shadows unnaturally, and I kept catching glimpses of movement at the edge of my vision. Tall, thin shapes that disappeared whenever I looked directly. The security cameras on my tablet all appeared normal, yet I could feel it watching me, moving in ways the cameras couldn't capture. Then came the sound, a dragging noise, slow and deliberate, coming from behind a row of stacked crates. I froze, listening, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The dragging stopped abruptly, replaced by the soft sound of breathing, deliberate, measured, and cold. I wanted to run, but my body refused. Something was stalking me, patient, waiting for me to make the first mistake, and I realized that in this endless concrete jungle, I was prey. I decided to check the far end of the warehouse, hoping to find the exit door or at least a security room. As I walked, the whispers returned, soft and almost playful, calling my name over and over. Lisa, Lisa. The boxes around me seemed to shift slightly as if breathing, and the shadows moved independently of the lights. I stopped near a stack of crates and noticed a ladder leaning against the shelves, but it hadn't been there before. A sudden chill ran down my spine as I realized the warehouse was changing, warping, folding itself in ways it shouldn't. The dragging sound returned, closer now, circling me. I spun, and for a brief moment, I saw it. A tall, thin figure, impossibly elongated, moving fluidly between the shadows. Its eyes, if you could call them that, glowed faintly red, watching me with a hunger I couldn't comprehend. I stumbled back, knocking over a box, and the echoing crash seemed to anger it. Whatever it was not going to let me leave, going to let me. Panic surged, and I ran toward the security office, hoping to find a way to lock myself in. The warehouse had transformed into a maze of impossibly long aisles and stacked crates that seemed taller and closer together than they should. Every step echoed with the dragging sound, now perfectly in rhythm with my own racing heartbeat. I caught glimpses of the figure darting between shadows, too fast to track, yet always there, always observing. I reached the office, threw open the door, and slammed it shut behind me. The room was dark except for the faint glow of monitors displaying static-filled cameras. As I glanced at the screens, my blood ran cold. Every camera showed the same empty warehouse, except one. In the far corner of aisle 47, the shadow was standing still, watching, stretching impossibly tall, its limbs bending in ways that defied human anatomy. I realized with horror that it wasn't just moving toward me. It was following me, manipulating the very building itself. I frantically tried to lock the door, but the handle twisted in my hand like it wasn't attached to anything solid. The whispers returned, closer now, as if inside my own head, laughing softly and repeating my name. My breaths came in ragged gasps as the dragging sound echoed directly outside the office. Then I saw it on the monitor. No longer in the aisle, but now standing directly in front of the office door. I slammed my body against the door, but it didn't budge. The lights flickered violently, revealing the shadow's form pressed against the glass of the office window, its long limbs stretching impossibly, almost liquid in shape. I felt a cold presence wash over me, like icy fingers sliding down my spine. The thing wanted me, and I knew that whatever it was, it didn't care about human boundaries. I realized the warehouse wasn't just a building anymore. It was a trap, alive, and feeding off my fear. I knew hiding wasn't an option. I tore myself away from the door and bolted down the nearest aisle, the dragging sound following in perfect rhythm with my racing heartbeat. The warehouse seemed to twist and stretch around me, the shelves elongating, shadows bending toward me, turning familiar aisles into an impossible maze. The whispering had grown louder, almost screaming, as if it wanted to drown out my thoughts, consume my mind. I stumbled over a pallet, sending boxes crashing to the floor. And for a moment, everything went silent. Then a cold, elongated hand shot out from the shadows, grazing my shoulder. I screamed, spinning around, but there was nothing there. Yet the oppressive sense of being hunted remained. Every instinct told me to run, but there was no exit, only endless aisles and the persistent, patient presence behind me. Whatever this was, it wasn't human, and it thrived in the darkness of the warehouse, feeding on fear. Desperation clawed at me, and I made a split-second decision to climb the stacks of crates, hoping to gain higher ground. My hands scraped against splintered wood, my feet sliding on uneven surfaces. But the shadows below moved as if alive, creeping up toward me. The dragging sound was everywhere, circling, echoing. And then the whispers became voices, overlapping in a deafening chorus, chanting my name. From above, I caught glimpses of the figure, impossibly tall, limbs twisting in unnatural ways, shifting between shadows faster than I could track. The warehouse wasn't just stalking me, it was reshaping itself around my terror. The exit doors I had seen earlier seemed miles away now, replaced by walls of dark steel and towering shelves. I realized that the warehouse had no intention of letting me leave. I was trapped, suspended between floors of crates and aisles of darkness. And the thing that hunted me was patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I knew I couldn't stay in the stacks any longer. With a surge of adrenaline, I jumped to the floor, landing hard, and sprinted toward the faint glow of what I hoped was the exit. The shadows moved with me, twisting and stretching across the aisles like living tendrils. The dragging sound was deafening now, perfectly synchronized with my panicked footsteps. As I rounded a corner, I caught sight of the figure again, impossibly tall and thin, its limbs bending in grotesque ways. Its face, or the void where a face should be, was now glowing brighter, and the whispers had transformed into a piercing scream that reverberated through my skull. My chest burned as I ran blindly, tripping over crates and boxes, desperate for any sign of light or freedom. And then I saw it. The exit door. My heart leapt, but before I could reach it, the figure lunged, moving impossibly fast, a black wave of limbs and shadows surging toward me. I slammed through the exit door and fell onto the gravel outside, gasping for air as dawn began to break over the horizon. For a moment, relief washed over me. I looked back, expecting the building to appear empty, safe. But the warehouse seemed alive. Shadows spilled from the door, curling like smoke toward me, and the dragging sound echoed one last time before disappearing. I scrambled into my car and sped away, never glancing back again. I quit my job immediately, vowing never to return. Weeks later, I received a package at my apartment with no return address. Inside was a single box, perfectly sealed, containing a small piece of the warehouse floor, a square of concrete with a faint, blackened shadow etched across it. I realized then that whatever haunted that warehouse wasn't confined by walls or doors. It had followed me, and the whispers would never truly stop.